So Carl Benz launched his cars in Germany when they were still illegal, there were no passable roads, and there were no gas stations. Can you imagine the amount of strength for one person to jump into the unknown? But how does that relate to bread? So hi, my name is JC and welcome to the Wild Breads podcast. So yeah, like I said, it probably took him a lot of strength, or he probably had balls of steel to do that. But I'm just not sure how his creations or like how his work spread throughout Germany and eventually throughout, the whole of Europe, and how it reached critical mass, before mass media. But maybe newspapers are mass media, maybe he advertised, I'm not sure. So with the Industrial Revolution came, radio and TV, in the 50s. And when TVs started to make their way into homes, maybe 70s, 80s, when, literally everyone you knew who could afford them had TVs in their homes. When that happened, getting the word out became easier and faster and cheaper. What companies started to do was that they just didn't, spread the word of their products. They started making claims of their products, like the best this, the best that, the number one this, number one that. And people, I believe that people are susceptible to most things that, that they hear on TV. So, people started believing them. This podcast is about that. It's about the word hype. And why do I want to talk about hype? So my problem with the word hype is that, when mass media came, especially TV, advertisers or companies, companies or advertisers or now had the opportunity to shout at millions, if not tens of millions of people. And they'd be fine getting, them to purchase even once. Yeah, so the word hype. So where did hype come from? Because I'm very certain that society did not evolve this way. For a long time, we as a society, or as a culture in the Philippines, we probably, our ancestors probably knew who farmed their rice. And that family probably sold, processed their grains and sold it to the village or the neighborhood as well. And our forefathers probably also knew their pig farmers and who also is their butcher. Even bakers, people probably knew their bakers as well. They're probably friends with them. The word hype isn't even in this picture because you knew who they are. Like, you knew they were there yesterday, and they're here today, and they're gonna be there tomorrow, unless of course they pass away or something. The question of hype and where it comes from is, from what I've read, it has come from the circus, or carnivals. So and for me, the picture of carnivals or circuses is they're traveling, so they usually go from city to city, town, or maybe even village to village before, when there weren't any big cities. So what they did was that to get the word out, they would send their hype men or hype women in advance, like maybe a week in advance, and just shout or just go around the village, go around the village and hyping this circus act that's gonna be there in the next 2 days or something. What's super interesting to me is that these hype men would always say that you may never have the chance to see them again, and that's probably right. So you're like, if you're just a normal person, in that town or village, it'd be like, oh yeah, I wonder what a lion looks like, or what a tiger who jumps, in rings of flame rings. I'm not sure what they're called, but they're rings with flames around them. This hype man would probably also arouse your curiosity by telling you that the circus can make a tiger jump, or make a lion sit, make elephants dance, or whatever. So you as a person, you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go see it, because I may never see it again, because I'm not sure when they'll be back and all that stuff. And the problem that I see with this is that, the goal of hyping things up is, or of circuses or of, these traveling salespeople is they want your business. Then, when they're in town, they want to take your money, not to create this environment where you're going to come back again and again, to buy something or to avail of a service or, build a relationship with, someone. So with that in mind, I mean, I just think that these days everyone's in a hurry. Everyone's in a hurry to be the biggest right away, to be the best right away, to be, to reach, to have a mass following right away. And I don't think it's their fault. We grew up in a society or in a culture where bigger is better, or the more following that you have, the more successful you are. I don't really blame who choose to do business this way. We live in a culture where we're taught that if you've got a huge amount of following, then you're a success. If you've got a huge amount of money, you're a success. So again, like, it's a race to being the biggest, to being the best, to be the number one. It's funny because, like, when I was young, I was younger, there was this TV channel, because there were like 3 main channels, TV channels in the Philippines, and one's ABS-CBN, and then number 2 is GMA. Those 2 would always say that they're the number 1 TV station in the Philippines. That's cool, but they were hyping themselves up. But then this, RPM, what was it? Yeah, was it RPM? RPN? Yeah, RPN. So I couldn't forget this because I think they advertised themselves as the number 3 station, which back then was like, whoa, like, they're not number 1, they're number 3. So I grew up, just believing they're number 3, and I'm fine with it. And I still watch. I mean, even as a young kid, like, I would still go on that channel. So it's funny, but now that I'm a baker and I'm selling my breads and all that, some part of me wishes that Wild Breads was bigger and then we had more customers. But then when we started 2 years ago, Nicole and I, we believed that the way to go about selling bread was not to hype ourselves up, because I can say that I have the best sourdough bread, but then there's probably 2 and 3 people who would not agree with me, so that would make me look like a fool. So what we did from the onset was not hype ourselves up, and instead I think I mentioned this in the previous podcasts, that we knew the people who we were gonna serve and interact with and put our energy and effort into. And I think they were the expat community, the well-traveled Filipinos, and 3 the people, the people who have some sort of idea about what sourdough bread is, like, through the internet. So, and it's interesting too, because I read an article by Kevin Kelly. It says 1,000 true fans, right? And with 1,000 true fans, the goal isn't actually to hype a product or a service or a business. The goal is to nurture that one person, because that one person may tell 2 others, and those 2 will probably tell 2 others too, and then it just goes from this one to this. There's so many examples of companies who didn't, or of products who did not hype themselves up, and one of them is Wikipedia. I've never seen, for the whole time I was on the internet since the year 2000, I guess, I've never seen one single form of advertising from Wikipedia, and yet everybody sort of knows them. And even Harry Potter, I don't think I've seen advertising of that in the early 2000s. I just received a book from my mother, who sent it to me after she's read all of them. I'm not sure how she's heard of it, but for me, that's one example of, you know, of something that's not hyped. And even 50 Shades of Grey, that's 50 Shades of Grey. I knew it was big because I've been hearing about it from my friends, and I haven't seen, you know, advertising. But maybe they did some sort of advertising. But I couldn't forget this time where I walked into a bookstore, right? And then there's this, I don't know, probably a teenager or maybe a college student who couldn't stop himself from being too excited that, you know, when you enter the store, you see this bookshelf full of, you know, the 50 Shades of Grey books. So that's interesting. So like I said, there's another way than just to hype yourself or your products, you know. And for us, that's, like I said earlier, it's, you know, that one, or maybe, you know, that first 2, first 3, first 5 people, you know, and then they'll tell others, you know, if they like it. But, you know, the thing as well with that is that when you know who you want to serve, and you know that you know that, you know, you're not in a hurry to be the biggest, to be the best, to be the luck, you'll just focus your energy into, you know, your craft. Like, the thing also about the first 1 to 5 people that you're gonna pour energy into is that if they like it, they'll actually come back, and that's more than enough, like, feedback that you'll need, you know. But, and also, if they don't come back, you just know that you probably need to make improvements, you know, to your craft or to your art, you know. Because the thing is, like, you know, 2 people who like your product I'm pretty sure will tell 2 of their friends, and if the 2 of their friends each, that's 4, right? And those 4, they probably have 2 friends. That's gonna turn into what, like, that's 32. So look, it's this podcast is about, like, hyping things versus not hyping things. And my stance is that you don't need to hype, you know, your products. You know, you don't, I mean, sometimes you do need pretty pictures and all that stuff, like, you know, these dramatic and, like, super produced pictures and all that stuff for your products or whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, and what worked for us, is that talking to people is important, responding to them, you know, in whatever context or emotional context they're in. That leaves an impact more than, you know, a pretty picture on Instagram. So, and it's also funny because, like, I was thinking about what I'd like to talk about today, and earlier the YouTube recommendation is just, it's crazy. It's, I don't know, I mean, but anyway, it recommended this video to me, you know, of a man in was it Brooklyn? I'm not sure, but let me check my YouTube. Is it Brooklyn? Philadelphia, you know, a food truck. And what's crazy about this food truck is that this guy, he has this, like, steel food truck, right? Just plain steel food truck with no name, with no signs, and with no menus. And then I was looking, you know, at the comments, and 2 comments actually stuck to me. And one of them is that there's this guy who said, like, I've been coming to him for 10 years. 10 years. Like, imagine that. Imagine a food truck with no name, with no signs, with no menus. Yet there's this guy who comes every day and buys his food for 10 years. And there was another guy who said that, wait, you know what? Let me just, because I'm gonna edit this out anyways. Number 2 is that when he gets there, there's actually a long line of people waiting for his food. But so it gets you to think, like, this guy doesn't have hype surrounding him, but what is making him successful? Or, you know, because like the long line, like every day, will probably make you think, or it made me think that, you know, this guy's probably making a killing, you know, on making his food, on selling his food. And my thinking, or the way I see it, is that this guy attracts hipsters. You know, that word has probably lost its meaning over time, but and it's funny because like that word, the word hipster is used to define someone who's not normal, or like someone at the edges, at the fringes. So anyway, hipsters. And this is such a good way to do business, because you're not trying to appeal to the mass, or, you know, to the masses, which, you know, every other person I've talked to before starting Wild Breads would always, you know, ask me like, how's your pricing? Like, is it, in Tagalog they would always say it as pangmasa, but all the more I actually, just a quick aside, every time I heard that, I said to myself that I'm actually gonna go the other way. I'm going to price my products like that's opposite of what's expected. Back then it was expensive, but then now with this new sourdough trend, you know, and you know, people selling their own work, the prices, I think, has gone up, and I'm still at that same price point. So anyway, so yeah, the point is, the goal is not to make products for the masses, for everyone, because like I've said this before that, you know, well, this is just for me, right? Like, everyone does not exist. Let me explain. So you can't make something that fits everyone, because no one thing can fit everyone. So the best way, you know, as a baker, for me, was to go and to the edges. So like I said in the beginning, in the middle of this podcast, maybe, I don't know, but I knew I was going to interact or reach out to expats, you know, living in this town. And then number two, you know, I interact as well with, you know, these well-traveled Filipinos who, you know, because they tell me that, you know, I've seen this in Europe. And number three, you know, there's people, you know, that has been exposed to, you know, sourdough bread through the internet. So the point of all this is that, you know, this is probably made for craftsmen and women, like, or artists, I don't know, or if, you know, there's one baker out there who's listening, you know, one micro baker, this podcast is more for you, because like I said, the goal is not to hype, but the goal is to just make things and, you know, nurture a relationship with, you know, that two people, you know, maybe three, who are buying your bread every single time. There's a story. I just want to go back to that hype thing. This hype is, you know, I think about this a lot, just because there's this store, there's this place in Laguna that I could not forget, and the reason is, you know, I walked into their store. The store was really, really good. It was, you know, Instagrammable in today's standards, and they've got these newspaper articles of them on their walls, and so I read one of them actually, and they were asked, you know, what they thought was the biggest contributor to their success, or to their, you know, to their success. And the owner said that, you know, hype was a big part of it, and he believes that, you know, for you to have a successful business, you need to hype it. And it stuck with me. I'm not sure why back then. I'm not sure if we even had Wild Breads before. I mean, back then when I read that, but for some reason it just stuck with me, and, you know, it got me to think, like, for many years, that, you know, do you need hype, you know, to be successful, to have a successful product? So now that, you know, Wild Breads, you know, is at a point where it is now, I would say that you don't need hype. You just need to talk to people, make them feel that they're heard, and just build relationships. That's it. You're not gonna get there by. I mean, pretty pictures are okay, but they're not the biggest variable to success. For me, it's about building relationships with the few people who choose to support you day in and day out. So I know this is more for micro bakers, or for that one micro baker who's listening to this. But if you're also a Wild Breads customer for a while, you know that we didn't always produce the best products and consistent products. We didn't do that. I mean, we didn't always produce consistent products, but for you to stay with us for as long as you did, thank you for that. That concludes today's podcast. I was hoping that this won't take long, but it's taken long. So catch you on the next one. Cheers.